Happy Thursday, everyone. There's lots of rain. I think I see some changing colors outside, just beginning. And, we've started back to school. And I'm wondering who has had a chance to go to the fair? I have. If you did you ride rides? Did you see any cool exhibits? Like, what kind of exhibits are at a fair? There's usually animals and some plants that people have raised or grown all year. You can eat some yummy food. You can look at things people made, like maybe they took something out of their garden and they canned it, or they made a really special pie, or maybe somebody made a quilt or an art project. Those kinds of things are at the fair, right? There's competitions for them and people win ribbons. The fair has so much to do. I never think that I get to see it all when I go. Our stories are, as you probably guessed, about the fair today, but shall we get some wiggles out first? So I think we're just going to go back to like following directions. Can you touch your head? Can you touch your nose? Touch your fingers together. How about your toes? I'm going to disappear. Touch your toes. Touch your head. Touch your shoulders. Touch your waist or your hips. Touch your shoulders. How about your ears? Your head? Your nose? Chin. Toes. Quick. Knees. Head, shoulders, knees, toes. How are we doing so far? Stretch your arms out wide, up high. Speaking of the fair, has anybody seen the poster? Out wide again, up high again. The fair poster has this big furry guy on it. A Bigfoot. A Bigfoot. This is one of those things that's kind of fun to hear stories about and pretend. So we're going to have a couple different kinds of stories today. The first one is called The Giant Cabbage, and it is about fair time and growing big vegetables. The Giant Cabbage, an Alaskan folktale. Can you guys see that moose? Moose looked out at his wonderful garden. He had rows and rows of tasty vegetables. The fair starts this week. I need to find my best cabbage for the Giant Cabbage contest. The vegetables all had grown very large under the midnight sun. Then he saw it. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage he had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, Moose marveled. Why, this is a giant cabbage. This is sure to win the prize at the fair. Moose trimmed the cabbage from the plant. He tried to lift the cabbage and load it onto the truck. He pushed and he tugged, he bumped and he shoved, but the cabbage did not move. It didn't even budge. Just then, Bear waved hello as she pedaled home from the library. "Please come help me load this cabbage," yelled Moose. Bear came right over. This is kind of a big floppy book. I hope you guys can see it pretty well. Bear came right over. She saw the cabbage. It was a huge cabbage, a big one, a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage she'd ever seen. "It's huge. It's enormous," Bear growled. "Why, this is a giant cabbage. This is sure to win a prize at the fair." "I cannot lift this cabbage alone," said Moose. "I will help you," promised Bear. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed a hold of the cabbage. They pushed and they tugged. They bumped and they shoved, but the cabbage did not move. It did not even budge. Wolf trotted by Moose's garden on his way to the post office and saw the cabbage. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage he had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, Wolf howled. Why, this is a giant cabbage. This is sure to win a prize at the fair. We cannot lift this cabbage alone, said Moose. I will help you, promised Wolf. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed a hold of the moose. Wolf grabbed a hold of Bear. They pushed, and they tugged, and they bumped, and they shoved, but the cabbage did not move. It did not even budge. Fox and Hare, do you see them? Jogged down the lane. They stopped when they saw Moose, Bear, and Wolf sitting in Moose's garden. Fox and Hare went over in hopes of a glass of lemonade. But then Fox and Hare saw the cabbage. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage they had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, barked Fox. Why, this is a giant cabbage. It's sure to win a prize at the fair, said Hare, hopping up and down. We cannot lift the cabbage alone, said Moose. We will help you, promised Fox and Hare. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed a hold of the cabbage, and Wolf grabbed a hold of the cabbage, and Fox grabbed a hold of the cabbage, and Hare grabbed a hold of the cabbage. They pushed and they tugged, they bumped and they shoved, but the cabbage did not move. It didn't even budge. Old Porcupine waddled along then. She saw her friend sitting in the middle of Moose's garden. Old Porcupine's eyes were not as sharp as they used to be, but she soon saw the cabbage. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was almost the biggest cabbage her old eyes had ever laid eyes on. Say, that's a pretty big cabbage there. That giant cabbage could win a prize at the fair, Porcupine said. We cannot lift the cabbage alone, complained Moose. I will help you, promised Old Porcupine, but first we need some tools. Old Porcupine sent Wolf to find her toolbox. Bear and Fox found wood for a ramp. Moose found rope in his garden shed. Hare moved the truck closer. At last, they were ready to try again. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Wolf grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Fox grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Hare grabbed a hold of the cabbage, and Old Porcupine grabbed a hold of the ends of the rope. They pushed and they tugged, they bumped and they shoved, and the cabbage began to move, but only a budge. Squirrel scampered down from his tree to see what all the fuss was about. He saw the cabbage. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage he had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, Squirrel chattered. Why, this is a giant cabbage. This is sure to win a prize at the fair. Well, it might, Bear sighed, but we have not been able to lift this cabbage. Have you tried a stick? Suggested Squirrel. I use sticks to move rocks that cover my cache of nuts. The animal friends thought this was a splendid idea. This may be just the thing we need to load this cabbage into the truck, said Wolf, pulling over a strong branch. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Wolf grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Fox grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Hare grabbed hold of the cabbage. Old Porcupine grabbed hold of the ends of the rope, and Squirrel grabbed hold of the branch. They pushed and tugged, they bumped, and they shoved, and the cabbage began to move, but only another budge. What we need is a teeny tiny little more of a push, insisted Old Porcupine. We're tired. We can't push any harder, whined Fox, but the animal friends would not give up. So they sat and rested. As the midnight sun moved across the sky, Little Vole poked her nose out of her burrow. She saw the cabbage. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage she had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, Vole squeaked. Why, this is a giant cabbage. This is sure to win a prize at the fair. Well, it might, Moose says, but we cannot lift this cabbage. I will help you, promised Little Vole. Moose grabbed a hold of the cabbage. Bear grabbed hold of the cabbage. Wolf grabbed hold of the cabbage. Fox grabbed hold of the cabbage. Hare grabbed hold of the cabbage. Old Porcupine grabbed hold of the ends of the rope. Squirrel grabbed hold of the branch. And Little Vole grabbed hold of the last teeny tiny little open spot on the cabbage's side. They pushed, and they tugged, and they bumped, and they shoved. They all pushed a little bit more, and the cabbage began to move up the ramp ever so slowly until whoop. The giant cabbage landed with a thump and a bumpity bump. Hooray! Shouted the animals. Then they sat down with a thump and a bumpity bump. We did it! Panted Hare. Oh, thank you. My dear, dear friends, cried Moose. Now we can go to the fair. The animal friends scrambled into the truck and thumped and bumped down the road to the fair. At the fair, the giant cabbage rolled slowly back down the ramp and landed with a thump and a bumpity bump right in front of the judges. The judges looked surprised. It was a big cabbage. It was a really big cabbage. It was the biggest cabbage they had ever seen. It's huge. It's enormous, they marveled. Why, this giant cabbage wins the prize for the fair. Hooray, shouted the animals again. Let's go have fun at the fair. See all the things they're doing? Now we need to get this fine cabbage home for our supper, said Mouse. It's a good thing I brought old Porcupine's toolbox, said Wolf. Soon the giant cabbage was trimmed into a giant pile of cabbage pieces. Moose and Bear grabbed hold of an extra large piece. Wolf and Fox grabbed hold of the largest pieces. Hare and Porcupine grabbed hold of medium pieces, and Squirrel grabbed hold of small pieces. And Little Vole grabbed the last teeny tiny little piece. They pushed and they tugged. They bumped and they shoved, and they plopped the giant cabbage pieces into the back of the truck. Then Moose, Bear, Wolf, Fox, Hare, Old Porcupine, Squirrel, and Little Vole scrambled into the truck, and they thumped and they bumped back down the road to Moose's house. Oh man, it's good food. Let's make some cabbage soup, suggested Moose. The animal friends ran home. Then they pushed and they tugged and they bumped and they shoved and they brought things for the soup. Moose dropped in the cabbage and stirred the pot. Bear dropped in potatoes and stirred the pot. Wolf dropped in squash and stirred the pot. Fox and Hare dropped in onions and carrots and stirred the pot. Old Porcupine bought loaves of her freshly baked bread. Squirrel dropped in spices and stirred the pot one more time, and dinner was complete with a yummy berry treat made by their own Little Vole. The animals danced and sang while the giant soup pot bubbled. Then they ate a wonderful meal of Moose's giant and now prize-winning cabbage as they celebrated their friendship under the midnight sun. And there are still probably leftovers if you really want some. That was a fun story. I really liked how all the friends worked together. Does anybody here like cabbage? I do. There's all kinds of things you can do with cabbage, right? I think so. I mean, you can put it in salads. You can make a coleslaw, which is a kind of salad made from cabbage. You can cook it with things. You could make cabbage soup. Cabbage is a pretty good vegetable. Okay, who remembers me talking about the fair poster? Do you remember what I said was on the poster for the fair? It was a big furry creature. Mine needs some fur. I'm going to put them up here on this board. I'll show them to you in a minute. But what was this big furry creature called? He's kind of a make-believe, fun creature. And the fair poster said, seeing is believing. Do you remember what he was? A Bigfoot. So, whoops. These are like Bigfoot in the winter because I didn't have any furry ones. But I want to do a little rhyme with you. And how do we say more than one Bigfoot? Is it still big foots or is it big feet? I tried to look it up and I found both. So we're going to say big feet. So 5 enormous big feet letting out a roar. Is that right? Should we count them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is right. Can you guys see their colors? Let's see if I can get this. Oops, okay, so we have this one. Can you guys see that? He's pink. How about this one? Blue and yellow. His face is orange. And this one, can you tell? He's got red cheeks, but he's gray. So we're going to say 5 enormous yetis letting out a roar. Let me hear your best roar. Good job. Okay. And one stomped away. And now how many are there, friends? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 enormous, what are they? Bigfoots, right? Yeti would be what they are in the wintertime if you saw one of these creatures. That's when we call them Yetis. Right now, Bigfoot it is. 4 enormous Bigfoots hiding in the trees. And one stomped away. And now there are 1, 2, 3. 3 enormous Bigfoots didn't know what to do. So one stomped away. And now there are 1, 2. 2 enormous Bigfoots having lots of fun, and one stomped away. And now there's how many, friends? Just one. 1 enormous Bigfoot saw the setting sun, and she stomped away. Roar! And now there are none. Okay, I have a really fun Bigfoot story. Let's see if we can zoom back out. Get back in story time here. It is a cute story about a pink Bigfoot named Buttercup. So Buttercup the Bigfoot. First, we have to meet this little girl. And her name is Willa Cathcart Wilmerding. Should we say that again? That's a big, long name. Willa Cathcart Wilmerding was the bravest little girl in the world. She climbed the tallest trees. She swam in the deepest waters. She petted the meanest dogs. She even liked spiders. Willa was good in school. She could spell helicopter and play the oboe in the orchestra. She was in Scouts. She had 326 merit badges. On Friday nights, Willa liked to climb up the roof and howl at the moon all night long. Can you guys howl? What do you think a howl sounds like? Maybe like a wolf? Or like you think a Bigfoot might howl? Good job. Willa, you must calm down and stop howling on the roof, her mother told her. It is time to concentrate on school and scouts. So Willa decided to go someplace where her mother couldn't hear her. So she packed her bag and she went to the mountains. High in the mountains lived a Bigfoot. She loved to scare hikers. She would leap out of her hiding place and roar and show her fangs and stomp her huge feet, and then she would howl. The hikers would drop their gear and run. The Bigfoot would take it all home and decorate with it. High up on the steepest peak, Willa reached the Bigfoot's favorite scaring place. The Bigfoot leaped out and screeched. Ow! Oh, Willa smiled. Ow! She said back. Bigfoot snarled and waved her long, strong arms. She jumped up and down so hard, she almost shook the mountain. I like you, said Willa. You've got big feet. And then she said, Ow! Finally, the Bigfoot went over Willa, and wiggled her sharp claws and growled and showed her fangs. Willa threw back her head and howled her favorite howl. Owie-wah! The Bigfoot just stood there. What's your name? Willa said. The Bigfoot said. Your name is Buttercup. Okay, said Willa. The Bigfoot nodded. I'm getting cold, Willa said, so Buttercup picked Willa up and carried her back to her cave. What a lovely home, Willa said. Let's play house. You be the baby, and I'll be the mommy. Buttercup said. I'll teach you, Willa said. Willa gave Buttercup a bath. Then she combed and brushed all her long hair. When Willa was done, Buttercup felt wonderful. You're a good baby, Willa said. That night they slept cuddled up together, warm and happy. Willa and Buttercup did everything together. They leaped up and down the mountains. They soared over mighty crevasses. They made each other crowns of flowers. But their favorite thing to do was to climb up on a high peak and howl all night at the moon. Okay, I want to hear your best howls. Good job! One day, a helicopter landed. Willa's mother got out. Willa, I miss you, she said. It's time for you to go back to school and scouts. Can Buttercup come too? Willa asked. I'm afraid not, Willa's mother said. It's a small helicopter. Willa hugged Buttercup. Don't forget how to play house, Willa said. Buttercup sadly waved goodbye. Willa went back to school. She played 8 new pieces on the oboe, and she earned 27 more merit badges. But she missed Buttercup. One Friday night, when she was softly howling to herself, she heard something. It was coming closer and closer. It was Buttercup, bounding over the rooftops. They hugged. I've been so lonely, Willa said. Buttercup said. Buttercup likes being a little girl. She has learned to divide and how to spell In the school orchestra, she plays the tuba. She even goes to scouts. She won a merit badge for her flower arrangements. Everything is fine. And every Friday night, Buttercup and Willa climb up on the roof and howl at the moon all night long. Okay, one more time, friends. Best howl. Oh my goodness. That was awesome. Okay. That's it for story time today, friends. I have a fun thing that I think you guys could all do because at the fair, we win ribbons, right? You know, first and second prize ribbons, third prize ribbons. I think you guys, let me see if I can find a picture of a ribbon. Do you see that ribbon? Isn't that so cool? I think you guys can use some fun paper and colors and make your own ribbon. If you need some, we might have some ribbons here, like paper ribbons that you could decorate here at the library. I'm so glad you joined me today, friends, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye for now.